Alrighty, good morning, folks. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. I want to just give you a quick little overview of what we're going to be doing with the Keller text. My B students yesterday, we did a little of this in class. They're a smaller group, so we got a little bit ahead of our A group. Um, but I'm going to demo this, what you're what we're looking for in this, okay? When you look at the text, the Keller text, the story of my life, that's the title of her autobiography, and this is an excerpt from it. So what I need you to do, you're not going to be marking this text up because I think I just have it displayed for you. You don't have your own copy. So we're going to zoom it. Let's try, that's a little bit too much, so I can go a little bit, maybe 150 is what we want. Zoom out just a little, and then I can just do it that way. Maybe do about 150 if... Okay, so we have been talking about authors' methods for a reason. Metaphor, personification, similes, juxtaposition, a number of different techniques. But what I need you to do is to be reading this text and looking for those examples, okay? On your actual assignment, I gotta minimize the window. That's the Keller method analysis here. I actually gave you some examples. I took something right out of the text, the quote and the paragraph number, as you see right here. Then I explained the kind of method that was used, metaphor, but it's not just enough to identify what type of method. You need to explain why that metaphor was effective. Anytime a T and Ready test asks you how does an author do something, you want to look at the techniques and the methods that they're using. All right? So here is the quote from the text. Have you ever been at sea in a dense fog when it seemed as if a tangible white darkness shut you in, and the great ship, tense and anxious, groped her way toward the shore with plummet and sounding line, and you waited with beating heart for something to happen? So let's just ignore these terms, plummet and sounding line. Those are tools on a ship that we don't know enough about. No, most people don't. But let's take the rest of this. Have you ever been at sea in a dense fog when it seemed as if a tangible white darkness shut you in, and the great ship, tense and anxious, groped her way toward the shore? So that first heavy line, what we have here is a metaphor. Whenever you pick metaphor or simile, you have to ask yourself, what two things are being compared? So what two things are being compared here? It's Helen Keller. She's comparing herself, how she felt being blind and deaf and not able to speak from a very young age, from 18 months onward. How did that feel? That felt like being a ship in a dense fog with no tools, basically, right? So that definitely is a metaphor. And so the way I explained it, because you want to develop, why does a ship in the dense fog, why is that a good metaphor for how she felt? What is she actually trying to say? So here is a demo. Keller uses the metaphor of a ship at sea lost in the dense fog to compare, here we go, compare, her feelings of being on a journey that is dangerous without any tools to help her see where she is going. Her choice of words, waited with beating heart for something to happen, connotes anxiety and fear. So without being able to see, hear, or speak, Keller's life was spent in a constant state of panic and waiting. Okay, so that is actually, if you look closely, the beginnings of a tree's paragraph. I've got the topic sentence explaining the metaphor, and then I kind of skip right into the evidence. with her choice of words and the quote, weighted with beating heart. But essentially, I've got the guts there for a trees paragraph. So her choice of words, because she goes down farther, you waited with beating heart for something to happen. With beating heart for something to happen connotes anxiety and fear. So without being able to see, hear, or speak, Keller's life was spent in a constant state of panic and waiting. So she's comparing her feelings of what it was like to be blind and deaf and not able to speak. It's like being a ship in that very dangerous situation, right? And then to explain that, that would be anxiety, it would be fearful, maybe even anger, I don't know. But this is the kind of stuff we want to develop. And remember, see how I used an actual quote here? So this is the beginnings almost of a trees paragraph, with this being the topic sentence. And then I kind of went right into the evidence. I didn't say much more about that, but I could have. And then this would be the elaboration sentence. So we're going to do that with each of these. And let me just give you a couple of more. I went ahead and read this yesterday, the first 3 paragraphs. This is the day that Annie Sullivan, Helen Keller's teacher, came to her home, and she was 7 years old. Okay? And she says here, on the afternoon of that eventful day, I stood on the porch, dumb, expectant. Now, dumb is not dumb as in ignorant. Back then in the day, dumb was the term used for someone who couldn't speak. It wasn't like a pejorative, bigoted term. It just was what the term they used for you can't speak. So she stood on the porch, dumb, expectant. I guessed vaguely from my mother's signs and from the hurrying to and fro in the house that something unusual was about to happen. So I went to the door and waited on the steps. The afternoon sun penetrated the mass of honeysuckle that covered the porch and fell on my upturned face. My fingers lingered almost unconsciously on the familiar leaves and blossoms which had just come forth to greet the sweet southern spring. I did not know what the future held of marvel or surprise for me. Anger and bitterness had preyed upon me continually for weeks, and a deep languor had succeeded this passionate struggle. Okay, languor would be a great word to look up, by the way, because I think it'd be a good word to use, find a way to use anyway in the future. It's just a good vocabulary word. So the very first thing that I think comes at least to my mind as I look through this was right here. This line right here has a couple of little methods in it. The first one is personification, inanimate object given qualities of something living. So my fingers lingered almost unconsciously on the familiar leaves and blossoms. So it's like her fingers had a mind of their own. They were unconscious. That means like a person is unconscious. That's a brain function, right? So for the fingers to almost be unconsciously lingering on top of the leaves and the blossoms, it's like the hand's doing its own thing, unaware. So that would be personification, which to me indicates she's in a far off place. She's just, her mind is elsewhere from her body. And blossoms which had just come forth to greet the sweet southern spring. This is what we call alliteration, the consonant sounds that are repeated, like Sally sold seashells on the seashore. And it has like a musical quality. It makes the reading of it more pleasant. And then, as I said before, a lot of rap lyrics use alliteration. A lot of cheerleaders, and they use alliteration a lot too. The next line here, anger and bitterness had preyed upon me continually. That's another example of personification. because anger and bitterness is not like an animal that preys. Those are emotions. So those emotions, she's kind of equating them to almost like a wild animal, or that is pursuing its prey, its victim. She felt somewhat victimized by these overwhelming feelings of anger and bitterness. So you can imagine living your entire life from 18 months of age, because I don't have any memory from before 18 months of age. I don't even know if I have any memories from 18 months. But her whole life has been in darkness and silence with no way to communicate. So there has to be frustration, anger, and bitterness. So that would be two examples there of methods. Then, of course, this whole paragraph is what we call an extended metaphor. And my battery, okay, 5%. And it's extended metaphor, meaning the entire paragraph is spent using the metaphor of a ship at sea. So she doesn't just say, it was like being a ship lost in the fog, and then goes on to talk about other things. Her entire paragraph here is explaining what it's like as though you were a ship lost at sea. She also personifies the ship, saying the ship was tense and anxious, groping her way toward the shore. All right, that's personification as well. And then the wordless cry of my soul and the light of love shone on me in that very hour. This would be a metaphor. Love was like a light shining on her. She doesn't use like, though, so it's a metaphor. And the wordless cry of my soul. That could be imagery, like a sound, but it's wordless. So I'm kind of thinking that could be personification of the soul. I don't know. That one, it's just very vivid. I think that's probably where we, I think I've done enough there just to demonstrate for you. So on this assignment, which I want you to have done when you come to class tomorrow and Friday, I want you to explain how this simile is effective, explain how personification here is effective and what it's trying to communicate. Then I want you to find a quote in the text somewhere with one of those methods on our slides. It can be any of them, and try to explain what it is and how it is effective. Okay? Okay, so here I've gone over what you're doing in the method analysis piece. Now I want you to go a little rogue, and number 5 is the tree, oops, I should say trees. You need the S there. Trees paragraph, all right? 4 to 5 sentences minimum. I really can't see how you do this in under, 6, 7 sentences, but when you're reading this, I want you to identify a turning point for Helen Keller in the text. There's a part in this 2-page story where things definitely take a turn. And we start to see, she starts to make her point that how important education is, how important it is to be able to learn and to grow. So I want you to find where that is, all right? And your topic sentence should start with, a turning point in Keller's text is when, and then in your own words, explain what happens, all right? Then explain why that's a turning point. Then introduce your evidence. Give a part of that, the quote, that you thought was most significant, okay? Do not just repeat, it's a turning point, but the significant statement, what clued you in that it was a turning point, all right? Elaborate on that. Tell us how this turning point began to change her and how you see it. And then finally, the overall significance should go back to your topic sentence on how this particular event helped to support Keller's message about the power of education and learning. In fact, I'm just going to tell you, your significance statement should include right here, this little phrase, somehow the power of education and learning, or the power of growing in your education or something. But that's where your significance statement should be, okay? So that's what you're doing today. And those of you that will be here in class tomorrow, preferably both days here, y'all can get working on this, okay? And then in class tomorrow, my A group, we may be fine-tuning your trees paragraphs, and then we're going to start talking about our essay, our mini essay. Okay? I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see some of you guys tomorrow, the rest of you Friday.